Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are heading to Italy,
Mm.
specifically Florence. But, we aren't just doing a general sightseeing tour where we grab a gelato and look at the Duomo.
No.
We are tackling a beast, a beautiful beast, but a beast nonetheless. We're talking about the Uffizi Gallery.
The Uffizi. I mean, you could argue it's the single most important collection of Italian Renaissance art in the entire world.
I think you'd win that argument.
But it's overwhelming. It's absolutely vast. It's crowded. And if you don't really know what you're looking at, it can all just become a blur of, Madonnas and gold frames.
Exactly. I've heard people say they stood in line for 4 hours, got inside, walked around for maybe 30 minutes, and then just needed a nap because their brain short-circuited.
That is a very, very common experience. It's like Stendhal syndrome, waiting to happen, an overdose by beauty.
Right.
When you are confronted with that much genius just packed into one corridor, the brain actually struggles to process it all.
So, our mission today is to cut through that noise. We've got a massive stack of research here: architectural history, art analysis, some incredible restoration reports, biographies of the Medicis.
Everything.
We are going to unpack not just the paintings, but the building itself, because, and this was the first thing that really, really surprised me in the research, the Uffizi wasn't built to be a museum, was it?
No, not at all. And that is the hook right there. I mean, if you just look at the name Uffizi, it literally translates to offices.
Offices, like cubicles and, I don't know, bad fluorescent lights and water coolers.
Well, the 16th century version of that,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
You have to picture the scene. It's 1560. Florence is under the absolute rule of Duke Cosimo I de' Medici.
Cosimo the First, okay.
And to understand the building, you really have to understand Cosimo.
The Medici family has, at this point, effectively dismantled the old Florentine Republic. They're absolute rulers now. And Cosimo wants to consolidate his power, but he has a very practical, almost a logistical problem.
Which his whole administrative machinery is a complete mess. The magistrates, the lawyers, the guilds, the bureaucrats, the actual people who run the state, they're scattered all over the city.
In different buildings?
To different rented rooms, basements, you name it. It's horribly inefficient, and more importantly, for a ruler like Cosimo, it's hard to surveil.
Ah, so he wants to bring them all under one roof so he can keep an eye on them.
Precisely. It's a power move, completely. But it's masquerading as urban planning.
Clever.
So he hires his favorite architect, Giorgio Vasari.
Vasari, the name you see everywhere in Florence.
The very same. The guy who also wrote the famous Lives of the Artists. He tells him to build a massive administrative complex right next to the Palazzo Vecchio, which was, the seat of government.
So when you walk into the Uffizi today, thinking about high art and philosophy and all of that, you are actually walking into what was designed to be a government office building meant to intimidate bureaucrats.
That is exactly the vibe. It was the magistrate's court. It was where you went to file a lawsuit or, God forbid, pay your taxes. It was designed for function and control.
And you just have to appreciate the transformation. I mean, it went from being probably the most boring place in Florence, the center of all the red tape, to being this treasure chest of Western civilization.
It's an incredible evolution.
So how did that happen? How did that shift happen from taxes to Titians?
Well, it started with Cosimo, but it really, really accelerated with his son, Francesco I. In 1581, Francesco decided to turn the top floor, the loggia, which had this beautiful open view, into a gallery.
So he just cordoned off the top floor?
Yeah. He really didn't care about the bureaucrats downstairs. He wanted a space where he could walk around and show off the family's incredible collection of ancient Roman statues to, grand visitors and other dukes. It was a private showroom.
A private showroom that eventually became one of the first public museums in the world. But, okay, before we even get to the art, I really want to dig into the architecture. Because Vasari didn't just build a box. He did something really, really clever with the design, didn't he?
Oh, he absolutely did.
Yeah.
If you were to look at the Uffizi from a drone's perspective today, you'd see it's a perfect U-shape. Two very long parallel wings connected by a shorter corridor at the far end, and it opens up toward the Arno River.
Right, and that courtyard in the middle of the cortile, it feels incredibly long when you're standing in it. It feels almost like a tunnel. It pulls you in.
That is the trick. That is pure Vasari.
Yeah.
Architectural historians often call this the first regularized streetscape of Europe.
The first what?
A regularized streetscape. He was obsessed with perspective. He used these continuous roof cornices, those unbroken lines running along the very top, and continuous steps at the bottom to create these intense, powerful perspective lines. It just draws your eye right down the tunnel.
It guides your vision.
Exactly. And look at what it frames. I mean, this is the genius of it. If you look one way, down that corridor, it perfectly frames the tower of the Palazzo Vecchio government, the Duke, power.
Right.
But if you turn around and look the other way, through that arch at the end, it frames the river and the hills beyond, nature.
It's a visual bridge between the city's power and the natural world that sustains it.
Yes, exactly. It connects the city's power to the river that feeds it. But it also creates a profound sense of order. You have to remember, Florence was a medieval city, a mess of narrow, winding, chaotic streets.
Right.
And then, bam, suddenly here's this massive, straight, orderly machine of a building. It was a statement. It was the Medici saying, we have brought order to the chaos.
So speaking of the interior, there's one room that kept popping up over and over in the research as the museum within a museum. The Tribuna.
Ah, the Tribuna.
Yeah.
This is hands down one of the most fascinating spaces in the entire complex. It was built a bit later by Bernardo Botticelli in 1584 for Francesco I.
The son who liked art more than bureaucracy.
The very one. And if the Uffizi was an office building, the Tribuna was the secret jewel box hidden inside it. A private sanctum.
It's octagonal, right, not a square room.
Yes. And that's the first clue. Everything about this room is symbolic. It wasn't just a room, it was meant to represent the cosmos, the entire universe in one space.
Okay, let's unpack this. That's a huge claim.
Yes.
How do you build a room that represents the universe?
You use the four elements. The Renaissance mind, they loved categorizing things by the elements: air, water, fire, and earth.
The classical elements.
Precisely. So Botticelli designed the room to embody all four. Let's start with air. The room originally had an open lantern or a small dome right at the top, connecting it directly to the sky.
Open to the weather.
In a way, yeah. It even had a weather vane on the roof that was connected to a pointer inside the lantern, so the air outside, the actual wind, was directing the room inside. You were connected to the atmosphere.
That's incredible. Okay, so that's air. What about water?
The dome. The ceiling of the dome is encrusted with thousands and thousands of mother-of-pearl shells.
Real shells.
Real shells, brought all the way from the Indian Ocean.
That sounds incredibly lavish for the 1580s. I mean, importing shells from the Indian Ocean just to glue them to a ceiling.
It was an immense display of wealth and global reach. It shimmers when the light hits it, like the inside of a sea cave. So you look up and you see water and air. Then, for fire.
Let me guess. The walls.
The walls, covered in crimson red velvet, a deep, fiery red.
And earth.
The floor. It's an intricate pietra dura mosaic made of precious marbles and semi-precious stones: jasper, lapis lazuli, agate, porphyry. So when you stepped into this room, you were literally standing on the earth, surrounded by fire, under a canopy of water, looking up at the air.
Wow. And what did they actually keep in this cosmic room?
The good stuff. The Medici's most prized possessions. But not the big altarpieces. Those were for churches or big halls. The Tribuna was for the small, precious things you could hold. Jewels, ancient cameos, small bronze statues, scientific instruments, natural curiosities like ostrich eggs or coral.
A cabinet of wonders.
Exactly. It was a cabinet of wonders, designed to show that the Medici controlled not just the state, but the elements of nature and the pinnacle of art combined.
It's amazing that we can still see this collection and so much of the Medici collection together today, which brings us to a really crucial plot point in the history of the Uffizi. Why is all of this art still in Florence? I mean, usually when dynasties fall or, die out, the art gets sold off, looted, or scattered to museums in London or Paris or private collections.
That is the great danger for any royal or ducal collection. And the Medici dynasty did die out. It's a sad story, really. By the early 18th century, the male line was completely finished. The last Grand Duke, John Gaston, was, well, let's just say he was not interested in producing an heir. He died childless.
So the family tree is dead. And then enter Anna Maria Luisa de' Medici.
The heroine of Florence, the savior. She was the sister of the last Grand Duke. When her brother died in 1737, she was the last surviving Medici on earth. She looks around and she sees the great European powers, Austria, Spain, France, circling like vultures, ready to carve up Tuscany and, more importantly, take the assets.
They wanted the art.
Of course they did. It was the most valuable collection in the world. But she did something absolutely brilliant. In 1737, she signed the Patto di Famiglia, the family pact.
The family pact.
It was a legal contract. It transferred the entire inheritance to the new ruling dynasty, the House of Lorraine, who were connected to the Austrian emperors. But there was a massive catch.
Okay, what did it say?
She bequeathed the entire Medici collection, everything in the Uffizi, the Pitti Palace, the villas, the statues in the public squares, to the Tuscan state. But she attached one very strict very legally binding condition
Which was?
that the art must never leave Florence.
Hmm.
Never. She wrote, and this line is so important, that it was for the ornament of the state, for the utility of the public, and to attract the curiosity of foreigners.
To attract the curiosity of foreigners. That line really stuck with me. She basically invented the concept of cultural tourism for Florence in 1737.
She essentially created the modern public museum in Florence. She was so far ahead of her time, she realized that the art was the city's identity. Without the art, Florence is just a nice town by a river. With the art, it's the capital of the Renaissance.
And without her foresight, the birth of Venus might be hanging in the Louvre today, or the Medusa might be in a private vault in Russia.
Absolutely. She locked it down for the public forever. It's maybe the single most important act of cultural preservation in European history.
Okay, so we have her to thank for it all still being there. Now, before we get to the actual paintings, there's one more architectural feature we absolutely have to talk about because it's honestly one of the coolest things in the entire city. The secret passage.
The Vasari Corridor.
This sounds like something out of a spy novel or a fantasy book, The Prince's Way or The Walk in the Air.
It really does. And the motivation behind it was pure paranoia and, well, practicality. We're back in 1565. Cosimo I wants to get from his home, the Pitti Palace, which is across the river in the Oltrarno district, to his office, the Palazzo Vecchio, without walking through the streets.
Why? Was the traffic that bad?
It wasn't the traffic, it was the people. The Medici had enemies, there were potential assassins around every corner, and beyond the physical danger, Cosimo felt it was beneath his dignity as an absolute ruler to mix with the ordinary crowds, getting mud on his boots, smelling the, unwashed masses. He wanted to float above them.
So he had Vasari build an elevated, enclosed passageway, a private highway.
And he needed it done fast. It was for the wedding of his son, Francesco, and Joanna of Austria. It was built in just 5 months.
5 months. That's lightning speed for construction in 1565. I mean, that's just...
Now, this thing is long. It's about 1 kilometer, roughly 750 meters. It's an incredible feat. It starts at the Palazzo Vecchio, goes through the Uffizi building itself, turns right, runs along the riverbank, crosses over the Ponte Vecchio, snakes through the facade of a church, passes over houses and through gardens, and ends up right at the Pitti Palace.
It crosses over the Ponte Vecchio.
It runs right along the top of the shops. You can see the little windows if you look up from the bridge today.
And this leads to a really funny historical detail. Do you know what kind of shops used to be on the Ponte Vecchio before the corridor was built?
Today, it's all expensive jewelry and gold. So I assumed it was always that way? Nope, not at all. Back then, it was the meat market. It was full of butchers.
Butchers? Why on a bridge?
Well, it was actually very practical. They would butcher the animals and just throw the waste, the bones, the blood, the guts, directly into the river below. It was a very efficient, if disgusting, garbage disposal system. You can just imagine the smell, especially in the Italian summer heat. So picture the Grand Duke walking in his fancy new corridor above, trying to look all regal. But this horrible stench of rotting meat is wafting up through the windows.
He wasn't having it.
Absolutely not. He evicted all the butchers. He decreed that only goldsmiths and jewelers could have shops on the bridge from then on. No smell, more prestige.
So the reason the Ponte Vecchio is world famous for gold today is because a duke didn't like a bad smell.
It was an urban planning decision based entirely on the Duke's nose. It's an incredible example of how the whim of one powerful person can shape a city for centuries.
I don't like the smell. Get out. I love that.
Exactly. And there's another little detail about the corridor that I love, which just speaks to that control theme. The corridor passes right through the facade of the Church of Santa Felicita.
Through the church.
Through the front wall. The Medicis wanted to attend Mass, but again, they didn't want to sit with the general public. So they had a private, grated window installed inside the corridor that looked directly into the church, specifically down onto the altar.
So they could attend church from inside their secret tunnel and, spy on the congregation?
A bit of both. They could be present, maybe seen from a distance, but completely untouchable. It's the ultimate VIP box. They were literally looking down on the people praying.
The corridor has been closed for renovations for a while, hasn't it?
Yes, for a long time. But the plans are to reopen it fully to the public relatively soon, which will be amazing. It houses a fascinating collection of artists' self-portraits, from the Renaissance masters all the way to modern artists like Marc Chagall.
So you can literally walk in the Duke's footsteps.
You can. It's a unique experience to walk that path and see the city from that very specific elevated perspective. You see the rooftops, the river, the people below. You really feel that separation, that power.
Okay, so we have the building, we have the secret tunnel. Now, let's get into the main event, the art. The Uffizi is laid out for the most part chronologically, which I think is so helpful because you can actually see the evolution of style right before your eyes. We start with what they call the Primitivi, the early masters.
And we have to talk about Giotto. If you were rushing to see Botticelli, you might just breeze right past the Giotto room, but that would be a huge, huge mistake.
Why? What makes him so important?
We're looking at the Maestà di Ogni Santi, the Madonna enthroned, painted around 1310. Now, to understand why this matters, you have to know what art looked like before Giotto. It was largely Byzantine.
Right, think of those Russian icons, very flat, two-dimensional, lots of gold leaf.
Exactly. Very stylized. The figures looked like paper cutouts. They didn't occupy real space. They were symbols of people, not depictions of people. They floated.
Ninjato changed that.
He revolutionized it. When you look at his Madonna, she has weight. She has a physical presence. One of the source texts uses a great phrase. It says she has prosperous breasts.
Meaning she looks like a real woman, a real mother who could nurse a child.
Exactly. She looks like she has a body under those heavy robes. You can see the shape of her knees. If she stood up, she would displace air. Gravity exists in Giotto's world for the first time.
It's the beginning of realism.
It's the seed of the Renaissance. He introduces the concept of 3D space on a 2D panel. He also brings in human emotion. The angels aren't just decorative stamps. They're individuals. They're looking at her with reverence, with distinct faces and expressions. This is the move toward humanism, toward observing the natural world.
Moving forward in the timeline, maybe a century and a half later, we come to one of the most famous portraits in history, the double portrait of the Dukes of Urbino by Piero della Francesca.
You know this one instantly. Two profiles facing each other against a vast landscape.
The guy with the broken nose.
Federico da Montefeltro. He was a fascinating character, a mercenary captain, a condottiero, but also a huge intellectual and a great patron of the arts. And yes, that nose, it absolutely dominates the painting.
It's very distinct. It looks like someone just took a scoop out of the bridge.
Well, it is brutally realistic. Piero didn't airbrush him. The story is that Federico actually lost his right eye in a jousting tournament. A lance went right through his helmet's visor.
Oh.
Because he lost the eye, he had a massive blind spot on his right side. So, being a practical military man, he had the bridge of his nose surgically removed so he could improve his peripheral vision with his remaining left eye.
Wait, he voluntarily chopped out part of his nose so he could see better in battle? That is some serious dedication to warfare.
It is, and that is why he is always painted in profile, specifically the left profile, to hide the missing eye and the scar. But now look at his wife, Battista Sforza, on the other panel. She's incredibly pale, almost ghost-like.
Is that a stylistic choice? The ideal of beauty at the time?
It's likely because she had just died. This is a posthumous portrait. She died in childbirth at a very young age, and this painting is partly a memorial to her. That's why there is such an emphasis on her elaborate jewelry and embroidery. It signifies her status and wealth. But her face is still and waxen.
That makes it so much more poignant.
It does. But what I love most about this diptych is the background.
The landscape, right?
It's a continuous landscape that runs behind both of them. It connects them, even though they're on separate panels. It shows their dominion over their land. The hills, the water, the fields. It's all calm, orderly, vast. It says, we rule this world with reason and order. It's the perfect Renaissance image of power.
Okay, now we arrive at the room that everyone is waiting for, the bottleneck of the museum, the Botticelli room. This is the blockbuster section.
The birth of Venus and Primavera. These are the images on the postcards, the t-shirts, the tote bags, the coffee mugs. These are the paintings people travel across the world to see.
Let's start with the birth of Venus. Visual refresher for everyone. We have a naked woman standing on a giant scallop shell, floating on the ocean, being blown to shore by wind gods, with roses falling all around her.
It is so iconic that we often stop truly seeing it. But just pause for a moment. This is a radical painting for its time. It's a monumental, nude woman who isn't Eve. She isn't a sinner from the Bible. She isn't shielding herself in shame. She is a pagan goddess, and she is being presented as the absolute ideal of beauty.
And she's breathtaking. The model is believed to be Simonetta Vespucci, right? The great beauty of Florence.
That is the legend. She was known as the unobtainable beauty, the muse of Florence. Botticelli was supposedly deeply in love with her and even asked to be buried at her feet in the same church.
Wow.
But beyond the gossip, the painting is a manifesto of Neoplatonism.
Neoplatonism, that's a $10 word. Break it down for us.
It was the philosophy that was really popular in the Medici court. They were trying to reconcile ancient Greek philosophy, specifically Plato, with Christianity. They came up with this idea that physical beauty was a path to the divine.
How so?
So, contemplating Venus's beauty wasn't lustful or sinful. It was a way to elevate your soul closer to God. You see her perfect form, and it makes you think of divine perfection.
So it's spiritual nudity.
In a way, yes. And notice the shell. In pagan myth, Venus is born from the sea foam. But in Christian art, the scallop shell is often a symbol of Mary or of pilgrimage. Botticelli is deliberately blending these worlds. He's saying ancient wisdom and Christian faith can coexist here in Medici Florence.
And what about Primavera or Spring? That one is way more crowded. You've got a whole cast of characters in this beautiful dark forest.
Primavera is a much more complex allegory, and unlike most paintings, it's meant to be read from right to left.
Right to left. That's counterintuitive. Okay, walk us through it.
Okay, so start on the far right. You see this blue, angry-looking figure flying in through the trees. That is Zephyrus, the cold wind of March. He is chasing a nymph named Chloris. He grabs her. It looks quite aggressive, and as he touches her, you see flowers starting to spill out of her mouth.
So the cold wind hits the earth.
And she transforms. She turns into the figure right next to her Flora.
The woman in the incredible floral dress who is throwing flower petals everywhere.
Exactly. Chloris becomes Flora. The raw, violent wind of March is transformed into the blooming beauty of April and May. Then in the center, you have Venus again, overseeing everything like a Madonna in a garden. And above her, her son Cupid is shooting a flaming arrow.
At the three women who are dancing in a circle.
The three graces. They represent charm, beauty, and creativity. They are dancing in a circle, signifying the cycle of giving and receiving. And then on the far left, you have Mercury, the messenger god, using his staff to gently clear away the last of the winter clouds.
So what's the big message? It can't just be spring is nice.
No, it's much deeper. It's an allegory for the golden age of Florence under Medici rule. It's a political painting. It's saying that under the Medici, peace reigns. The clouds are cleared away. The cold winds of war are transformed into the flowers of culture. It's an allegory of love, fertility, and civilization holding back chaos.
The detail is insane. One of the sources mentioned that botanists have identified hundreds of specific real flower species in the grass.
Yes, it's not just generic grass. It's a scientifically accurate Tuscan meadow in May. You can find irises, daisies, violets, cornflowers, wild strawberries. It shows Botticelli's incredible attention to the natural world, even while he's painting this mythological fantasy.
Okay, moving on from Botticelli, we get to the high Renaissance titans. We're talking Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, all in a few rooms.
The heavy hitters.
Let's start with Leonardo. The Uffizi has a very early work of his, The Annunciation.
This one is so fascinating because it's young Leonardo. He's still learning. He's still experimenting in his master Verrocchio's workshop. And there's a famous mistake in this painting that people love to point out.
The arm, right, the Virgin Mary's arm.
Yes, her right arm. She is sitting at this very ornate lectern, reading. And if you stand directly in front of the painting, the arm looks way, way too long. It looks disjointed, almost like it's broken or belongs to an orangutan.
Did Leonardo, the genius of anatomy, actually mess up?
For a long, long time, critics thought so. But modern computer analysis and scholarship suggests it was an intentional optical correction, a technique called anamorphosis.
How does that work?
Well, the painting was never intended to be seen straight on, like in a modern museum. It was meant to hang on a side altar in a church, probably high up on a wall. Viewers would have approached it from the right side, looking up at an angle. And if you view the painting from that specific angle, from the right and below, the arm shortens due to perspective, and it looks perfectly natural. Leonardo was accounting for the viewer's physical position in the room. He was painting in 4D.
He was doing 3D projection mapping in 1472. That is just wild.
He shows his obsession with optics and how things are actually seen. And look at the background. It's not a biblical desert. It's a misty Tuscan landscape with a harbor and mountains. It has that sfumato, that smoky atmospheric perspective that he became so famous for.
And the angel Gabriel's wings, they don't look like typical angel wings.
No, they don't. They look like bird wings, a bird of prey. Leonardo was obsessively studying the flight of birds at the time. He was dissecting them.
Right.
So he put real biology into his theology. He couldn't help himself.
There's also his Adoration of the Magi, which is famously unfinished.
And that one is almost more interesting because it's unfinished. It's like looking directly into his brain.
Yeah.
You can see the underdrawing, the frantic sketches. You see the chaos of creation.
It's not a calm nativity scene.
Wow. Not at all. He didn't just paint a nice nativity scene. He painted a crowd reacting with fear and doubt and astonishment and wonder. It's a psychological study of a miracle's impact. And in the background, there's a battle of knights and a ruined pagan temple. He's showing the old world literally crumbling as the new spiritual era begins.
Let's pivot to Michelangelo. He was primarily a sculptor. He famously signed his letters, Michelangelo, sculptor. But the Uffizi has his only finished panel painting, the Doni Tondo.
The Tondo, which just means round. It's a circular painting.
Why circular? Was that a common thing?
It was a very specific thing. It was a common shape for a desco da parto, a birth tray. Wealthy Florentine families would give these painted trays to mothers after a successful birth, and they'd be filled with sweets and broth. This was almost certainly commissioned for the birth of a child in the Doni family.
But this doesn't look like a decorative tray. It looks like a sculpture group that happens to be painted.
That is Michelangelo's signature. He paints like a sculptor. The Holy Family, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus, they look carved out of stone. They have incredible volume. They have muscles. Even Mary looks like she works out. She has defined biceps.
She's twisting, right, in a really complex pose.
Yes, the figura serpentinata. The serpentine figure. She's seated on the ground, twisting her entire torso to take the baby Jesus from Joseph, who is behind her. It's a complex, difficult pose. Michelangelo is showing off. He's saying, look what I can do with the human body. Look at the tension, the power.
And the colors are incredibly bright. They almost hurt your eyes.
They are cangianti, colors changing or iridescent colors. Bright oranges, shocking pinks, cold, glassy blues. It's not the dark, smoky look of Leonardo at all. It's almost metallic. This painting paves the way for the Sistine Chapel ceiling. If you look at this, you see the blueprint for the Sistine Chapel.
There's something a bit weird in the background of this one, too. There are a bunch of naked guys just sort of standing around behind a wall.
The famous big nudie, the nude youths. This has puzzled art historians for centuries. Why are there naked men in a painting of the Holy Family?
So what's the leading theory?
The leading theory is that they represent the pagan world humanity before grace, before the coming of Christ. They're separated from the Holy Family by a low horizontal wall. And if you look closely, John the Baptist is standing between the two groups, acting as the bridge from the old world to the new.
It's a history of salvation in a single circular image.
Exactly.
Okay, to complete the triad of the High Renaissance, we have Raphael, his Madonna of the Goldfinch.
And if Michelangelo is all tension and muscle, Raphael is harmony and grace. This painting is just gentle. It feels so soft.
It's Mary with two little kids, Jesus and his cousin, John the Baptist.
And notice the composition. It's a perfect pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Mary's head is the apex, and the two boys form the wide, stable base. It's incredibly balanced and pleasing to the eye. Raphael studied both Leonardo and Michelangelo when he was in Florence. He took Leonardo's pyramidal composition and Michelangelo's sense of volume, but he smoothed out all the hard edges. He made it beautiful and lovable.
Why the goldfinch? Why that specific bird?
The goldfinch is a complex symbol of the Passion of Christ. The legend was that the goldfinch got the red spot on its head because it tried to pull a thorn from Christ's crown during the crucifixion, and a drop of Christ's blood fell on it.
So in the painting,
John the Baptist is holding the bird up to Jesus, and the baby Jesus is reaching out to stroke it. In that simple, tender gesture, he is accepting his future sacrifice. But he does it with such calmness, such sweetness. It contrasts so sharply with Michelangelo's muscular intensity in the next room.
we're moving into a different vibe now. We are leaving the spiritual idealism of the High Renaissance and entering the world of sensuality, drama, and the Baroque transition. And we have to talk about Titian's Venus of Urbino.
This painting is direct.
That is a very polite way of putting it. It's a nude woman reclining on a bed, looking straight out of the painting, right at the viewer.
And unlike Botticelli's Venus, she isn't a distant mythological goddess on a shell. She is a real woman in a real bedroom on real rumpled sheets. This is flesh and blood.
Who is she? Do we know?
We don't know the model for sure, but the context is really interesting. It was likely commissioned as a wedding gift, possibly a teaching tool for a very young bride. Guidobaldo II, Delaware Rover's new wife.
A teaching tool for what, exactly?
For marriage. In the Venetian tradition, female sexuality within marriage was seen as essential for procreation and marital harmony. If the woman wasn't happy, you wouldn't get an heir. So the painting is celebratory of marital intimacy.
There are symbols here too, right? The little dog sleeping at her feet.
The sleeping dog represents fidelity, loyalty within marriage. So it's saying be sensual, but be faithful to your husband. And if you look in the background, you see two maids rummaging in a cassone, a wedding chest, for clothes. It grounds the scene in domestic reality.
It feels very intimate, but also very confrontational, her gaze.
It is. She is holding a posy of roses. She covers her pubis with her hand, but it's a gesture that actually draws attention rather than hiding. It's this perfect blend of modesty and invitation. This painting absolutely shocked people. It changed the history of the female nude. Manet's Olympia, centuries later, is a direct, scandalous riff on this very painting.
From sensuality to pure shock, we get to Caravaggio, the master of light and shadow.
And the master of drama. The Uffizi has his incredible Medusa,
This isn't a normal canvas, is it? It's painted on a shield.
a convex wooden parade shield. It was a ceremonial gift to the Grand Duke. Caravaggio painted the exact moment of decapitation. The blood is spurting from her neck. The snakes in her hair are writhing. Her mouth is open in a silent scream.
And her face just looks utterly terrified.
The secret here, the thing that makes it so disturbing, is that it's believed to be a self-portrait. Caravaggio used a convex mirror to paint his own face as Medusa. He's capturing his own expression of horror.
That is deeply intense.
Caravaggio was an intense guy. He was a brawler, a murderer on the run. The Uffizi also has his sacrifice of Isaac, and again, he captures the precise millisecond of the action. The angel isn't just appearing in a holy light, he is physically grabbing Abraham's wrist to stop the knife. Abraham looks annoyed and confused. Isaac is screaming in genuine terror. It's not a posed holy moment, it's a gritty, violent struggle.
Speaking of violent struggle, we have one more artist in this section who brings a very, very different perspective. Artemisia Gentileschi.
A powerhouse. One of the truly great painters of the Baroque, and one of the few women to succeed in this completely male-dominated world. And her painting, Judith beheading Holofernes, it's visceral.
It's the biblical story of Judith, the Jewish widow, who kills the enemy general to save her people. But the way she paints it...
It's messy. It's hard work. Judith isn't some delicate, beautiful assassin. She is strong. She is using all her strength to hold him down. Her maidservant is helping. And the blood is not stylized. It's soaking the sheets. It's spurting. It's real.
And you can't really talk about this painting without talking about Artemisia's own life.
No, you absolutely can't. As a young woman, she was raped by her painting tutor, Agostino Tassi. There was a humiliating and public trial where she was tortured with thumb screws to prove she was telling the truth.
Horrific.
So scholars look at this painting where a woman is physically and righteously overpowering and killing a powerful man, and they see a cathartic expression of female power and rage against male domination.
It feels incredibly personal.
It absolutely does. She often painted herself as Judith. She takes ownership of the narrative. It's one of the most powerful and, I think, important paintings in the entire gallery.
We've covered a lot of history, but the Uffizi isn't just a time capsule. It's a living institution that has faced very modern challenges. In 1993, tragedy struck Florence.
The Giorgio Fili bombing. It was a mafia car bomb that exploded in the street right next to the west wing of the Uffizi. 5 people were killed. It was a horrific attack, part of the mafia's war on the Italian state and on its culture.
Did it damage the art?
Yes, badly. The explosion tore through the Western Corridor and the Niobe Room. Ancient Roman statues were shattered, frescoes were destroyed, paintings were shredded by flying glass. It was absolutely devastating.
And they rebuilt.
They did. And if you go today, there's a very moving memorial. In the Botticelli staircase, they decided to leave one of the damaged areas visible, a wound in the architecture, to remember the victims and to remember the attack. It's a powerful reminder that art and culture are fragile and must be protected.
Since then, they've been engaged in the Nuovi Uffizi project, the new Uffizi.
It's a massive expansion and modernization. They moved the state archives out of the ground floor to open up vast new exhibition spaces. They've essentially doubled the gallery space.
So it's not as cramped as it used to be.
It's much more breathable now. They've added new rooms for the self-portraits, new rooms for the 16th century Venetian painters like Titian and Veronese. It flows so much better.
And they have the Niobe room back open.
Yes, dedicated to the tragic Greek myth of Niobe, the mother who bragged about her 14 children and then had them all killed by the god's wrath. It features these majestic Roman copies of Hellenistic statues and huge dramatic canvases by Rubens. It's grand and theatrical and has been beautifully restored.
Before we wrap up, we need to give you, our listeners, some tactical advice because as we said at the very start, this place can be a beast to navigate.
Absolutely. First rule, do not just show up. Do not. We will wait in line for 4 or 5 hours in the sun. Book your ticket online well in advance. It is non-negotiable.
Best time to go.
Either the very first slot in the morning, the 8:15 a.m. one, or late in the afternoon. The big tour groups tend to clog the corridors in the middle of the day.
And don't try to be a hero.
Right. You absolutely cannot see everything. You will burn out. Focus on the main U-shaped corridors on the top floor. Hit the Giotto, the Botticelli, the Leonardo, Michelangelo, Raphael, the Titian, and the Caravaggio rooms.
Pick your battles.
Exactly. If you try to read every label on every painting in every single side room, your brain will melt. Treat it like a tasting menu, not an all-you-can-eat buffet.
That's perfect advice. As we close out, I'm thinking about the arc we've traced today. We started with a cold, functional office building for bureaucrats, and we ended up with the greatest collection of Renaissance art in the world.
It really is a timeline of human thought and consciousness. You walk in seeing the gold-laden, fearful devotion of the Middle Ages. Then you see Giotto giving real weight to humanity. Then Botticelli trying to find God through pagan beauty. Leonardo using science to understand art. Michelangelo turning paint into stone. And finally, Caravaggio and Artemisia showing us the raw, bloody, complicated reality of human emotion.
It's the story of us figuring out who we are, painted on canvas and panel.
That's it, exactly. And I think the most important final thought is that family pact. The Uffizi began as a place of absolute control of Cosimo's offices. But because of Anna Maria Luisa de Medici's foresight, it became a place of freedom, a public space for art, for everyone. Dynasties fall, political power fades, but the culture remains.
That is a great note to end on, but I have one final provocative thought, a challenge for you when you listen to this.
What's that?
When you go or when you look up these works online, look for the hidden things we talked about. Don't just check the birth of Venus off your list. Look for the hundreds of specific flowers in the grass of Primavera. Look for Leonardo's optical illusion in Mary's arm. Look for Caravaggio's own terrified face in the shield of Medusa. Find the human stories hidden inside the offices.
I could not agree more. That's where the magic is.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you on the next one.